Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ash's Album Review, my comprehensive review series where I look at albums new and old and give my opinion on them. This is the pilot episode, so if it is a little rough around the edges, please bear with me. I am learning. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you find my opinions based and or gamer pilled. So come join me on this journey of mine. Today we're going to be looking at Every Time I Die's new album, Radical. The order of business today is Every Time I Die's new album, Radical. Radical was released on Epitaph Records on October 22nd, 2021, last month, and is the band's 8th studio album as of the release of this video. For me personally, Every Time I Die acted as the flagship band for a lot of my taste in heavy music today. Slowly, my introduction from alternative rock and a lot of more classic Slowly, my taste from alt rock and grunge music changed into a heavier taste as I discovered more music. Pretty soon, I heard about Every Time I Die from my father, who tells a variety of stories from being on Warped Tour, and Every Time I Die just so happened to be one of them. And eventually, I decided to check them out, and upon experiencing the total musical clusterfuck, I was like, what is this? I didn't really understand what I was listening to. It was like kind of punk, it was kind of metal, but it was something different. It was something in between, and I didn't really know what it was at the time. But with the introduction of bands like Hatebreed, Drain, and also Every Time I Die, I started to understand what the gray area was, and boom, hardcore. Mind blown. You know, if you stick the angry dude in cargo shorts, the guy with the obituary shirt, and the crippling alcoholic in the same room, they might not all get along. But overall, that's just my personal introduction to the band, which is kind of the pre-review. So let's actually get into the review itself. Every Time I Die is really well known for their song structure. This weird ass riffing and Keith just belting these fucking awesome demon vocals over this just huge bombastic set of really heavy guitar riffs. And this, of course, is all overwhelmingly present in Radical. Every Time I Die's Radical sports their subjectively best production that they've ever had. It's very sleek, it's very modern, it's very clean, it's very bassy. It's just all around really good. Even in the first opening 10 seconds of this album, you're instantly hit with Dark Distance. Even in the first opening 10 seconds of the album, you're hit with Dark Distance, this extremely discordant and heavy and loud song, and it's just like, oh my god, I'm not ready for this, because you're not. Spare only the ones I love, slay the rest! The entire album just feels like the whole band is cranking everything up to 11. The drums are the most intense and the most loud. The guitar tone is the heaviest and gainiest. The bass tone is the bass, still the bass. And Keith's vocals are just so intense and dark and just fucking And this is all just in the intro of the album. We haven't even passed 10 seconds. As far as deviation from sound in Every Time I Die's discography, this is definitely their most modernly influenced album, which is pretty good for a hardcore band that's existed for 20 years. There's a lot of different gent sections. There's some part that feel like a creator like old school thrash metal. There's a lot of different really cool melodic sections of the song, which is really cool to have this dynamic of a lot of clean and a lot of really distorted parts, which just adds a lot of interesting dynamics to the whole album. Especially in the clean vocals department, it was experimented a lot more with in Low Teens and 2016, but that album's okay. But I feel like it was really perfected with songs like Things with Feathers in this new album, and it just kills it really well. As far as the theme of this album, I didn't really understand what all of it meant until I listened to, I forgot which, but I listened to a podcast where he explained the whole idea that this was a lot of experiences in the pandemic. And as I listened to the whole album the first time through, I just thought, oh, these are cool songs, you know. Keith Buckley is an incredible lyricist, and he has always been really good with lyrics. But to relate to a lot of things that is then cleared up in a lot of the songs that he's writing, it's like, oh my god, these songs connect to me so much better. And like, oh my god, he's always been so great. Of course, like read Map Change, the lyrics to that song, it's like. As far as favorite tracks in the album, I'd have to say Postmortem for the really good riff that follows a greatly structured song. Dark Distance for the incredibly brutal and awesome opening. Things with Feathers is a really cool experimental clean song. I liked a lot of the clean guitar. It felt like kind of like an old school composition. It had a really cool kind of way of leading every part into each other. Of course, All This and More is another great song on the album. The guest vocals are awesome, and it's just such a brutal fucking song, man. Apart from the very few issues that I have with this album, I think the main thing is that a lot of Every Time I Die songs suffer from the fact that there's not a lot of choruses, there's not a lot of hooks, there's not a lot of catchy sections. There are a couple catchy melodic sections of this album, but it's not their strongest suit. So when you have this like 16 song album collection of like discordant riffs and really heavy breakdowns and stuff like this, it can kind of all blend together. You know, 4 or 5 songs in on my first couple listens, it kind of sounded like all songs kind of were the same, and I don't want to be that fucking guy because that's really annoying. And as I kept listening to this album, my taste for each individual song develops. So listening through the album on repeat, which is what I've done, I listened to this album many times over to try and get a very accurate judgment of this album. As I was listening to it over and building more of a like an intimate relationship with each song, I started to kind of understand a lot of the different parts of the songs, and the album became kind of a shorter listen as where I understood every single song and it didn't feel like as much of a chore. I would attest that to be like the only primary issue of the album. Um Again, I first criticized that I didn't see much of a story in the album, like as far as a cohesive album, it didn't tell much of a story, but actually it tells a great story because it talks about a lot of really traumatic and troubling times of the past 2 years, which, hey, I'm pretty sure everyone and literally their mother can relate to. But this issue can be pretty subjective. I have a short attention span. I'm a very easily distractive person. But again, just to a lot of poppy audiences, the lack of hooks can probably turn a lot of people off. And I think that might accost this album and bring it down a little bit. But otherwise, I think it's incredibly solid. And so, to conclude, I think that this is a great album. I think that it's an incredibly great stride for an old band kind of refurnishing themselves, coming out with this incredibly original and incredibly inspiring, heavy, brutal ass album that just kind of fills you with energy and hope for the future. And I'm really grateful for that. The past 2 years, there's not a ton of inspiring music that's been out, you know. Many artists have been able to write, but not a lot of stuff has been based on good or happy events, you know. People have gotten a lot of songwriting material, but it's a lot of the same shit that everyone's experienced. But I think that Every Time I Die did this really well. The lack of hooks can bring the entire album down, but overall, I think the entire cohesive albumness, while suffering a little bit, is still very solid. I give this album a 9 out of 10. Excelente. The creme de la creme. Good album. Good stuff. Thank you so very much for watching. Subscribe, like, do all the funny stuff. Follow me on all the social medias. They'll all be linked below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a blessed and beautiful day. I love you.